because I've sensed like a sentiment shift a little bit, at least from the educational efforts. It seems like people are starting to understand some of the benefits that this technology brings to the energy sector. Do you feel like there has been a shift in DC? Because, like you said, the Biden administration, they kind of snuck in that DAME tax in their budget proposal. That tax, I think, 30% of the electricity cost for miners. Now, I don't think that's likely to happen, but it kind of shows how there's differing sides that are pro Bitcoin mining and against Bitcoin mining. But I see that sentiment shifting where they're starting to understand the benefits. Do you see that too?
Yeah, so definitely noticed a couple of sentiment changes. Post FTX, it was all crypto is deemed bad.
Yeah.
Fast forward to today, Bitcoin is not crypto. Bitcoin is Bitcoin, then there is crypto, right?
Yeah.
While crypto still needs to be regulated, Bitcoin is a commodity. It doesn't need to be regulated in the same way. So you're definitely seeing a shift from that perspective. Bitcoin has been bifurcated from digital assets writ large.
Right.
You're seeing all this forward movement from the traditional TradFi guys moving into Bitcoin ETF products and custody products and all these other things that you're seeing. So clearly Bitcoin is being adopted into the investment and asset management environment in the United States and broader speaking in Europe. What the US still has to do on the regulatory front is fix this whole issues of securities versus not securities, smart contracts, stable coins, etc., so that they're more in line with what's going on in Europe and other parts of the world to simplify things. But there's clearly been a sentiment change. Additionally, there's been a sentiment change on the whole energy story of Bitcoin, because where previously the media was writing about it, oh my God, they're going to burn up the planet. I think there was one media report from a few years back where by 2022, Bitcoin would consume all the energy on the planet. We're still less than a fraction of 1%. So we got a long way to go before we get there. But this is an industry that is driving energy security and energy policy. Look at what we're doing in Texas relative to grid stabilization. Our operations in UAE are stabilizing the grid in the United Arab Emirates. And there have been cases where by us being able to shed load quickly, shut down our systems, we've been able to keep blackouts from happening in some of their member states. There are some really interesting projects going on all over the world, Africa, Latin America, and other places where Bitcoin miners are going to provide not just grid stability, but also financial stability for the grid operators, because they have a need for baseload customers like Bitcoin miners, people that can take large amounts of energy that otherwise is stranded. And then you look at what we're doing around capturing methane, converting that into energy that we can mine Bitcoin with, and then using the heat offtake from the Bitcoin mining to feed back into low-grade industrial processes.
Wow.
And so what you're going to see are really two different types of businesses from Bitcoin miners. They're either going to be an industrial kind of utility support grid stabilization type of miner where they're on grid and they're helping stabilize the grid by shedding, and they're buying up excess energy on the cheap. Then you're going to have what we call energy harvesting miners, which is what we're doing around methane capture, around using the heat offtake for things like heating greenhouses, shrimp farming, other things like that. And so I think you're going to see these kind of micro miners who are heating buildings with the heat offtake. They're using it for agriculture. They're drying wood products. They're doing all sorts of things with it. And then you see the utility scale sites. And over time, those utility scale sites will likely be joint ventures with power generators who have a need to balance the grid, or utility operators. And then those micro scale sites will be all sorts of businesses doing diverse things. That Bitcoin mining will be some insignificant portion of what they do, but you'll have thousands and thousands of people doing that, which will provide for an even more decentralized Bitcoin network and even more stability.
It's exciting. I mean, you hear about, I see all the time on social media, people using ASICs to heat their homes. I've seen a greenhouse where they're growing flowers and then selling the flowers with the excess heat. But you guys did something interesting recently, which is using, capturing that methane from a landfill, right? You guys, if it's a pilot program that you guys, can you talk a little bit about that? Because I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, so we needed to validate a hypothesis we had. There are lots of landfills in the US and all over the world that are spewing out methane gas. In some cases, those landfills are close enough to a transmission line or close enough to a natural gas line that they can refine that methane, convert it into a type of gas they can inject in the gas line, or they can turn it into energy and sell it to the grid. But 50% of all the landfills in this country are not able to do that. And so what are they doing? Well, they're either just venting the methane, which is the worst thing for the environment, or they're flaring it, which is an inefficient thing, because when you flare methane, you're not burning 100% of it. It's like a car motor that's been badly tuned, right? You're not going to burn, and so it emits a lot of still bad stuff. So what we decided to do is we needed to test the economics. Can we cost effectively mine Bitcoin using methane gas from a landfill? And can we get consistent uptime and production out of it such that it's economically viable to start scaling? And most landfills can get you, 2, 3, 4 megawatts of power, which is fine for Bitcoin mining, but it's not like building a whole new gigawatt site in the middle of Texas somewhere.
Right.
So there's going to be a lot of these sites, and we've been focused on developing the technology that lets us run those sites, remote, very little human interaction needed. But the pilot site in Utah has exceeded our expectations relative to energy efficiency, and the cost to produce Bitcoin. And so we're super bullish about rolling this out on a bigger scale.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're pro-environment, how can you argue against that?
Exactly.
How can you argue against that? And I think it's interesting how you guys have these pilot programs, see if it works, build out the technology to do it, and then scale it from there. It sounds like that's what you did with your mining facility out in Abu Dhabi too, because there were some challenges with the environment there, right? The climate.
Yep.
And then you guys kind of figured out a way to do it. Can you maybe divulge a little bit more detail about that?
I mean, listen, I've been in the tech industry for 40 years, and if you talk to people who are software engineers or product engineers, you have a hypothesis about something. Well, you don't go take and shoot a rocket to the moon. You have to first figure out, how do you leave Earth's atmosphere? How do you do it safely? So you look at, what is the single biggest problem I need to solve for, and let me solve that. If I can do that, now everything else I have to do should be easier. And eventually you get to a point where you feel comfortable enough that, okay, I can do this. Yeah. And, it's a lot of money to do these projects. Yeah. So we use lean methods. Now, lean is a tech system that was developed by Toyota back many years ago for automobile manufacturing, but it's used throughout the manufacturing world today, and even in the software engineering world today, around building prototypes, testing, piloting. As you build more confidence, you are willing to invest more. And so we are doing lots of experiments, a lot of which we don't talk about. And many of those fail. And so we don't progress on them. But the ones that do succeed at the lab level go into a pilot. And when they go into a pilot, if that succeeds, they go into production. And so with UAE, we had the challenge that our partners had worked with lots of different people to try and make mining work properly with sufficient uptime. And the challenge to us was, can you operate a megawatt for an extended period of time with good uptime? And so we designed, we looked at kind of the climate criteria. We came up with a design together with our container partner, a company by the name of Submer. And we kind of optimized a design they had for our specific needs. And then we deployed one as a test. And it ran for 100 days without a human being having to open the door to the container and do anything. That's unheard of in the Bitcoin mining. Wow. Most air-cooled mining sites have an army of people going around, swapping out fans, cleaning machines.
This is out in the desert, right? This is
in actually the center of Abu Dhabi, the center of the city.
Oh, wow, okay.
I mean, it is. You look at pictures of the site, and there's skyscrapers all around it.
Wow, okay.
And so, yeah, the average temperature is 100 plus degrees. It's 95% humidity.
Which is challenging for those ASICs,
Which is challenging, right? Yeah. And the ASICs are fully immersed in dielectric fluid, and the site runs beautifully. 99.9% uptime with very few hardware errors at all. And these systems just run super stably. So we built confidence. Both our partner got confidence in us and our ability to execute. And then we rolled it out, and now we have 250 megawatts of capacity there.
And it's a symbiotic relationship, it sounds all right, because it helps stabilize their grid. And then when you guys think about expanding internationally, you guys probably think about a lot of different things. Are you thinking about maybe diversifying across jurisdictions because there isn't regulatory clarity in the United States as much as other jurisdictions? Are you thinking about just where are there opportunities in terms of energy resources that might be beneficial for you guys to tap into? Is there things that, what are the things you think about? Because it seems like you guys built another one in Paraguay.
Yes.
It just seems like these things, like how are the UAE and Paraguay connected? And are you guys just finding these like opportunities and saying, hey, this is interesting to us?
So we focus very much on having some beliefs, hypotheses, if you would, about how we could optimize what we do. How could we do what we do better? And what do we need to be able to do that? And so, which is why we've kind of divided our business into this concept of industrial scale mining, large sites, grid stability, and then this kind of energy harvesting where we're doing methane capture and using the heat for other stuff. Two very different types of use cases. But when you look in the developing world, you have old power infrastructure and new power infrastructure, and the two of them often are disconnected or are inefficient. So in the case of Kenya, for example, you have traditional hydroelectric dams that operate for decades, and then now they've added solar energy. And when you add solar energy, you get excess energy at times of the day, and so they're not able to sell the hydroelectric energy. So now they're not generating revenues that help support the maintenance of the hydroelectric
It's
dams.
a problem.
So they need a baseload customer who can co-locate at the dam and suck up the excess energy because the transmission lines are being used for all the solar. So that's a grid stability issue, right? Paraguay, they have the Itaipu Dam, which was built between Paraguay and Brazil, generates upwards of 14 gigawatts of power, yet, and Brazil gets half of it, Paraguay gets half of it. Paraguay's total national consumption of energy is about 3 gigawatts.
Wow.
And from that dam, they used less than a gigawatt, most probably, which means there's a lot of energy that they haven't been able to sell at a profit, which means that the electrical utility has to basically support these tools, but can't operate profitably. And so by them inviting Bitcoin miners to come in and start mining Bitcoin, they're able to sell this excess energy at a price that allows them to, over time, reach not just break even, but generate some profits, which allows them to feed that money back into maintaining the dam, maintaining the infrastructure, and then lowering the cost of electricity for people in Paraguay.
Yeah, so it basically improves the economics, right, for Paraguay. Right?
Yeah, that's the way it is across all solar sites. One of the challenges you have here in Texas, for example, West Texas, all these incentives to build wind and solar farms. Everybody goes and does it. Guess what? Most of those don't operate profitably. Why? They don't have transmission capacity sufficient to sell their energy all day long. And so they have to sell energy at a loss. So Bitcoin miners come in and they take that excess energy, and it helps also balance the grid. So you provide profitability opportunities for projects to develop renewable energy while at the same time providing grid stability.
Well, it sounds like a win-win, which is a rare thing in the business world, honestly. And so I just, it makes a lot of sense, and it makes me encouraged because on boots on the ground, you can just see the benefits that this technology brings to the energy sector as well as the sovereign nations for welcoming this stuff into their infrastructure.